No press conference last week because of the bye. So here we are with Mike Tomlin's press conference before our Week 6 game versus the Cleveland Browns. Browns made a trade today. I don't think Tomlin would be able to talk about that. I think that probably happened after this. So they did make a trade today, trading away Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals. They sent Flacco and a sixth in exchange for a fifth. So if he talks about them having Flacco as a backup, that no longer applies. It is Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Let's see what Coach had to say.
Good afternoon. Certainly was a good bye week for us on a lot of fronts.
Hell yeah.
First and foremost, from a health standpoint, feel really encouraged about the return of some people who've been out. Guys like Alex Highsmith and Joey Porter Jr., for example, worked yesterday on our bonus day, and the arrows pointed up on their participation. But we'll follow them throughout the week to make sure it continues to move in the appropriate direction. I think the same thing could be said for Jaylen Warren. Obviously, he missed the last game, but looked really good yesterday. And so excited about those guys. Two guys that we're watching very closely that certainly are going to be limited at the front part of the week, but may perk up and be included toward the latter part of the week is Calvin Austin with his shoulder and Jalen Ramsey with his hamstring. Both have been highly aggressive from a rehabilitation standpoint during the bye week, and so really encouraged about the potential of those guys, but we'll take it certainly day to day. The bye week is also an opportunity for us to sit back and take a look at some of the things that we've done schematically, adaptations we've made to circumstance, whether it's matchup related or player availability related, to look at the overall trajectory of our units, offensively, defensively, and special teams relative to our vision. Also to look around and look at some of the things that are trending in the game, how people are producing or preventing big plays, whether it's run or pass, the turnover game, gadget plays, etc., possession down play, fourth down appetites. We looked at a lot of things going on globally, and I think oftentimes you do that. But I think that's one of the advantages of maybe having an early bye, just to get a sample size of how the ball is being rolled out globally in 2025 at the early stages of it. And we did some of that. It was a good experience for us, but it's also really good to get back into the world of competition this week. We had a really good bonus day yesterday, putting an emphasis on physical conditioning and running and playing football that way as we get back and warm back up to it. And so excited about continuing that during the week. I'll talk briefly about about Cleveland, some things going on with those guys. First on offense, obviously last week they went to Dylan Gabriel. This guy's a unique rookie. First of all, he's 25 years old, Hawaii native. He's a year older than Herbert, to put perspective on it. He's a 6-year college player. He threw for over 18,000 yards in college, 155 touchdowns, 32 interceptions in terms of a TD to interception ratio. And so I think that in-helmet perspective, you can't put a price tag on. He also threw for 10,000 plus yards in high school. And so he is a rookie, new to the National Football League, but this guy's thrown the football around a lot. He's older and more experienced than most rookies. I think timely processing is his superpower, and I think his experience and that superpower has been on display. And I think those are one of the central reasons why they went to him. He's able to function with fluidity in an effort to minimize negativity when passing. They play a lot through their running back and their running game anyway. And so we got a big challenge dealing with him and dealing with them this week. I mentioned their running game. I can't say enough about what I'm seeing from Judkins. This guy's played in 4 games. He started 3. He had absolutely no training camp to speak of, and that really highlights what it is that we're looking at. Kudos to him and kudos to them for what he and they are able to produce. He's a tough runner. He's good inside. He's got good patience and pick and vision on interior running. He finishes off his runs with violence. He's underrated in terms of his ability to bounce it to the perimeter and pop long ones. He had a 60-yarder or so. They got called back in London last week that kind of highlights that. I've seen this guy a lot. Obviously, we got a couple of his teammates from O State, and so I've seen a lot of his video, man. He is a complete back. He's the type of guy that can wear a defensive unit down. Certainly fits their mold. Is an awesome replacement, if you will, for Nick Chubb, and I think it's going to do nothing but get better with him and them. And when speaking about their run game, certainly offensively they got a lot of young people playing. I've mentioned Dillon and Judkins as rookies, but Isaiah Bond and Fanning are also rookies. And so they have a lot of young guys at the eligibles. But what they don't have is inexperience up front. There are three interior people, Teller, Palcic, Batonio, man. They've been doing it a long time, man. I think Batonio's got 166 starts. The other guys have around 90 apiece in the National Football League. They probably got 50 or so together, that collective. And I think that interior group up front really sets the pace for them. Down in and down out from a protection standpoint and running the ball, I don't think enough is written and said about that collective and how critical that collective is to their offensive output and stability. Got a lot of respect for those guys, man. We got a full day's work ahead of us trying to minimize their run game with that runner and those three interior people up front. In the passing game, certainly, as I mentioned, Gabriel's superpower is his process and his timely processing, and I think that's on display in his utilization of tight ends. Njoku is a guy that we've been dealing with for a long time, really talented, really good after the catch, can turn screens and checkdowns into big gains. He's got a highlight reel full of plays of dragging defenders and things of that nature under those circumstances. And Fanning is an oversized athlete. I think you box him in when you view him as a tight end. There's been some of those athletes in recent years. I think Brock Bauer reflects that in Vegas, for example. He's probably the prototype of the young guys in that mold, if you will. I think that's one of the reasons why we were really excited about acquiring Jonnu, is because I think he fits into that category. Those guys are unique athletes. They got really good run after and athleticism. They're matchup problems for linebackers. They're oftentimes too big and strong for secondary people. And I see all of that in Fanning's play. Saw a lot of his Bowling Green tape. He's a talented guy. You're doing an awesome job of utilizing him. And on the outside, with Judy and Bond, man, they got some guys with big-time athleticism capable of producing big plays. They're doing an awesome job of taking care of the football. They don't have anybody with ball security negligence in their group. Judkins was very good in terms of protecting the ball at O State. As I mentioned, Dillon Gabriel's been really good through his college experiences in terms of protecting the ball. And so we got to be ready to win possession downs. They do an awesome job of staying in manageable possession downs, third and short, and things of that nature. They play behind their run game in that way. And so, man, we got a real challenging game ahead of us from that perspective. On the other side of the ball, they got great players. They got great schematics. They got an experienced coordinator in Jim Schwartz. I think, they're probably one of the top defenses in football. Statistically, it doesn't matter how you describe it or shape it. They're good against the run. They're good against the pass. They're good in situations, sudden change, tight red zone, et cetera. Obviously, if you're starting up front, and that's what you do, it starts with Myles Garrett. He's a game wrecker. We're highly familiar with him. But everyone in the division is, yet and still. I think he had 2+ sacks versus Baltimore, 2+ sacks versus Cincinnati this year. And so we'll take our shot at working to minimize him. A component of that is staying out of one-dimensional passing circumstances. We better do a good job of that. Certainly we're going to deploy all the schematics that most people do, trying to minimize a guy like him. We'll use tight end body position. We'll use chip help. We'll slide the line that way. But everybody does. This guy has 100 or so career sacks with people doing that, yet and still he still gets home. That's why he is who he is. And so, we have that to contend with. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the other guys. The rest of the guys are doing great, man. Mason, the draft pick out of Michigan, is a plug-and-play type. Is highly disruptive, and the rest of their group is as well. They do a nice job deploying schematics, man, as you work to do some of the things that people do to minimize Miles. The other three guys work in tandem. They have awesome three-man games versus four linemen and things of that nature that really wreak havoc on pass protection. They got a strong secondary led by Denzel Ward and Delpit. Those guys have been back there for a long time, man, and play smart. They do a great job of communicating. They're multiple, as I mentioned. Swartz has been around a long time, man. That guy does a great job of working to play to their strengths and to cover up potential weaknesses that all units have. You see that in his schematics. He's thoughtfully aggressive. You feel game planning. He caters his plan week to week based on the things that opponents do. He's capable of going big in 5 defensive linemen versus run games and so forth that he respects. Saw a lot of that versus Baltimore. He's multiple in terms of dime packages and so forth against teams that throw the ball around a lot. Saw that a lot against Cincinnati, for example. And so we got a lot of work in front of us. We got a long week. We're highly familiar with those guys, but they're highly familiar with us. And I just think that that's the fun and excitement of divisional play, that intimacy, those relationships. And certainly we have some new guys to us that need to establish themselves in the North, and they have some new guys that we need to familiarize ourselves with. And so looking forward to an action-packed game, and more importantly than that, we got a solid week of work in front of us in preparation. I'll pause and open it up for questions.
Mike, you had mentioned at the beginning about just looking what's going on around the league in terms of, you said, preventing big plays. What are you seeing in general? What are you seeing teams do against you in that regard?
Specifically us or globally?
But maybe you guys in particular.
Oftentimes big plays are self-inflicted wounds, and particularly some of the ones that we've given up. And it can occur from a myriad of things. Lack of cohesion due to newness, or lack of player availability and losing some communication skills because of those things, or it could just be failure. But oftentimes, when you see highlight reels of big plays, oftentimes it's defensive negligence, and certainly at times that's been the case with us.
What are you seeing from the opponent in terms of defending you guys?
Trying to prevent big plays.
Oh, yeah, well, just identifying people that get down the field and utilizing schematics to minimize that, but that's nothing new. Everybody knows that DK Metcalf is a one-on-one challenge down the field, and so he doesn't get many one-on-one opportunities down the field. But that's, we experienced that life with George Pickens as well. I think anytime you have somebody that's a down-the-field matchup issue, particularly when you competing against a coordinator as experienced and savvy as Jim Swartz, they're going to minimize those things first and foremost. And so I think
Take away what you do well or
of
what you want to do.
First and foremost is identifying those that produce them, and then deploying schematics that make the ball go elsewhere.
In terms of communication and cohesion defensively, what does having Deshaun Elliott back do to help that secondary?
Well, he's been here and he's been in the National Football League in the position that he plays as a hub of communication. And so we're happy to have him back, but that's just a component of play. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention his playmaking as well. He's a good blitzer. Last week he had an interception and a sack fumble, and I think I'm more excited about having those tangible things back than some of the things that we're discussing.
Does the play of Herb against Sawyer maybe shift the divisional labor a little bit, even if Alex is able to play this week?
That's something that we ponder once we see that Alex is available and to what degree he is in football shape. He's been out a number of weeks, and so there are a lot of variables to that discussion in terms of how we divide the labor up, and only time and a week's work will tell.
Mike, the Browns are allowing the fewest yards on the ground. They run a lot of one-high balls and stack the box a lot. What do you guys have to do after having your best run game yet this season when you guys were in Iowa?
Well, we better block them, we better run hard. We better finish off runs. We better have a finisher's attitude in terms of which direction the power falls. As you mentioned, they're elite in terms of run stopping. And so what does that mean? That means that we got to be solid. We can't have unblocked people, but beyond that, we got to play well as a collective. We got to play physical, and we got to finish. And we got to understand that, you know, a successful day might be 3 and 4 yard runs at times, and we got to take what we can get sometimes from that regard.
How much of what you did and did well against Minnesota with the extra tight ends, heavier sets that you had is applicable moving forward, whether it's against Cleveland or anybody else, or was that just kind of a Minnesota-specific thing?
No, we have a certain personality, particularly when we play 4-3 teams. I haven't been bashful about that. That's why we drafted Darnell Washington. You can't play 4-3 teams with 250-pound tight ends. You can't. They're weight classes in combat sport for a reason. And so when the edge people are 300 pounds, you better have somebody out there that looks like that animal. And so that was our intentions in Minnesota. And so certainly as we move into divisional play in the next couple of weeks and we're playing 2 4-3 teams, chances are you're going to see more of that. It's unfair at times to ask guys like Pat Fryermuth and Connor to block 4-3 ends. That's not real realistic if you want to have a real good run game day.
Mike, that's what I was just going to ask you, would that help explain why Pat has played so few snaps actually through these first 4 games?
Well, I'm not talking about the totality of 4 games, but certainly last week, the matchup component has a lot to do with how we distribute snaps at that position. When you're looking at 4-3 units, as I mentioned, you better have some big people in that C and D gap area.
But we're still talking about tight ends. You mentioned Harold Fanning. We're seeing kind of a reinvention of the tight end in college, now trickle into the NFL. How much do you think that's still untapped at the league?
I don't know that it's new, to be quite honest with you. There have been a bunch of dynamic tight ends, it seems like, over the years in college ball, and it usually translates guys that display big-time run after, guys that are tough matchup problems for linebackers and oftentimes too athletic for DBs. In general, over the last 10 years or so, those are the tight ends that go in round 1, those unique animals. And the good players generally go in like round 3. And so that's just my perspective on it. I think the only reason he sat on the board as long as he did because he was a MAC player. But when matched up against Power 5 opponents, I think maybe it was Texas A&M or somebody I saw last year, he was not out of place by any stretch. He's a big-time player.
Mike, who do you look at it as options if Calvin can't go?
You know, it's not necessarily about pulling from people that aren't here. It's about the elevational roles of guys like Roman Wilson and Scotty Miller, for example. And so I'm excited about watching those guys work and maybe get some elevated participation. I think that's one of the beautiful things of the journey that is a season. You're going to get faced with some challenges as a collective. One man's misfortune is another man's opportunity. Case in point, Jalen Warren wasn't able to go in Dublin, and I think a lot of people had an opportunity to appreciate Kenny Gainwell, something that we already appreciated, something that we've been watching day to day during the course of team development. And so hopefully a week from now, if Calvin is unavailable, we're saying the same things about some others.
Mike Roman hasn't been utilized much, if at all, the first month or so. Is that more about the guys ahead of him than anything he may or may not be
Or it
doing?
might just be our selection of personnel groups. We've been talking a lot about multiple tight ends.
Can't play 15 guys on
Spencer
offense.
Anderson reporting as eligible.
Said that yesterday.
The utilization of multiple tight end groups. And so his lack of participation might not mean anything relative to his performance or either what's going on at his position. It might just mean how we choose to deploy our personnel groups through the first month of the season. And so it's still very early in this process. We got 13 straight games ahead of us, so keep watching.
Mike, what kind of challenge is it, or is it even a challenge to kind of recapture some of the momentum that you guys had before the bye in Ireland and to translate?
I'm not worried about momentum. I'm just worried about getting better. I think that's the spirit in which we should move. At the early stages of the year, it's about getting better week in and week out. Momentum is secondary.
Speaking of getting better week in, week out, I know you don't want to look too far ahead, but do you take...
As we start to look ahead, go ahead.
Look ahead. Preparation-wise this week, knowing you have 2 divisional games in 5 days over the course of the next 2 weeks, how do you...
Oh,
take that
yeah.
into consideration?
It's Thursday
I'm just
night.
locked in on this week.
Starting on your own 35, which is one of the best in the league, and you guys are also converting a lot of red zone trips into touchdowns. What is the next step for you guys to get into the red zone more often?
Keep playing, keep getting better.
Execute.
You know, as I mentioned, it was like the momentum question.
Get better.
At this stage of the game, man, it's about getting better. It's about continuing to find rhythm in terms of how we divide the labor up, what schematics work for us, how we can function with efficiency in all three phases.
Mike, you talked about getting help for Miles Garrett, but what do you do from a coaching perspective with Broderick Jones? Maybe just sort of mentally, do you challenge him? How do you talk to a guy facing that matchup the first time?
I don't know that it requires conversation. I think Broderick is not a dummy. He realizes who he's competing against this week, and he's a competitor and a professional. And so I hadn't spent any time thinking about how I'm going to talk to or motivate Broderick this week.
Mike, you guys use a lot of tight ends, so do the Browns. They run a lot of 12 personnel. How do you guys counter that with the way they use Njoku and the way they try to mix up their game? And does you guys using 12 personnel a lot help your defense in preparation?
I think oftentimes, unit personalities are formulated through competition against your team. And so certainly we deploy a lot of multiple tight end personnel groups, and so we have experience defensively in terms of being diverse, in terms of some of the things that we can do to attack that personnel group. But I'm sure that they've seen a lot of it because, as you mentioned, they use a lot of tight end groups as well. Largely, though, I just think that general discussion falls more into the category that these divisional relationships are intimate. We know them, they know us, and so it's game on.
When you got Kenny Gainwell, was part of the thinking to get another back in here that had replicable skill sets to what Jalen provides, so that in the case of injury, you guys can do a lot of the same things?
No, we just thought he was a good player that was kind of underutilized within the system that he was in because Saquon was just so talented. We played against him a year ago, and he made some critical plays against us in the running game and the passing game. He covered kicks. I think he had 8 tackles last year for Philadelphia on kickoff. He returns kicks. And so we just looked at a player that had a versatile skill set in a lot of areas and that we thought was capable of more than what we were looking at on tape due to circumstance.
Mike, how different is it, or what challenges, I guess, does it maybe present to try to prepare for a rookie quarterback who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of film out there?
I don't necessarily view it as a challenge. I just think we're faced with these type processes every week. Sometimes you have a large body of work to study, sometimes you don't. Particularly early stages of the season, you don't have a large body of work to look at anyway. And so we've kind of been in that mode through the month of September. And so it doesn't feel irregular to look at preseason snaps in an effort to gain a larger body of work in terms of getting a feel for his skill set. And so, I imagine if it was later in the year, it would feel a little different. But we've been kind of in that mode. Everyone's been in that mode as you push through September. It's just not a lot of tape to look at relative to 2025 for anyone.
I know they just switched to Gabriel, but you mentioned a couple weeks ago, last year, maybe not wanting Flacco to get in the game. Is that something that's on your mind again this time around?
And I mentioned that last year, a few weeks ago, specifically because of the dramatic difference between Flacco's skill set and Richardson's skill set. I don't know that they're doing things dramatically different in Cleveland, whether it's, Dylan in there or Joe. And so it might be less significant this week than it was when I cited that example.
You talking about how much you played Spencer Anderson. It's one thing to say, hey, maybe 6 offensive linemen is a good idea. It's another to have 6 offensive linemen that you want to get in the game. What has he done to earn that opportunity and get the, what? Not every 6th offensive lineman that some of the head coach wants to put out there.
He's a capable guy. He's played some starting football for us in the past. He's a versatile athlete. I think he was a former high school tight end at one point in his life. If you give him a minute, he'll tell you about his AAU basketball resume. And so, I don't want to make more out of it than what it is, to be quite honest with you. He's the man that's up in that regard.
Knowing that it is a small sample size, when you looked back at what you've seen from your offense through the first 4 weeks, what was your biggest takeaway in terms of areas you want to see them improve?
All areas, to be quite honest with you. That's the nature of this thing, particularly when you have a young front, individually and collectively. I just think the only way that you get better and gain experience is through playing. And so we've had some good moments. We've had some moments that aren't good. We got to keep pushing, and we better win along the way. That's my general mindset or tenor regarding the subject.
What did you see that you liked about Caleb Johnson, and was it important to him to have him kind of get back immersed in the offense?
I think that he's going to continue to get better with opportunity. He doesn't have control over when those opportunities occur. And so when he gets them, he better make the best of them. I love the way that he's working during the course of the work week from a practice perspective. And so, as I mentioned, we got 13 straight games ahead of us. I'm sure he's going to get more opportunities to let his talent show and, more importantly, to develop talent and experience. He's a third-year junior. I don't view that as a negative. I love to be a part of people's growth and development. But at the same time, I don't get amnesia. I don't like that in the spring and then hate that in the fall. And so as a leader, man, I embrace the get better component of his profile. And sometimes that's going to require work. Sometimes it's not always going to be pleasant moments. But that's what they pay me for.
What do you guys do better against the run against Minnesota? And with the way the Browns, they run into a lot of stack boxes, they're not afraid to run even when teams lower the line. What do you guys have to continue to do better against them?
Just the collective growth that I've been talking about a lot, but also you'd be remiss if you didn't talk about the presence of Deshaun Elliott being a major component. I thought his presence was significant in that game last week, being a down safety, a guy that plays in and around the line of scrimmage.
Mike, what have you learned about your secondary in the last few weeks because of the injuries? And with Joey coming back, does everybody kind of slide into those roles from game one?
I mentioned early in team development that I liked our depth, particularly at the cornerback position. Well, certainly that depth has been tested. Talked a lot about BE and how excited we are to have him. He's done a nice job. James Pierre has done a nice job in playing more as well. It's good to have veteran backups, man, guys that have played in the National Football League and started some of that. And certainly those things have been tested. And to have a full complement of players is not something that I view as a problem. We'll go through the week. We'll keep pushing in terms of evaluating people's availability and levels of conditioning, and then we'll kind of divide the labor up appropriately so based on that information at the end of the week.
Eccles hasn't played a lot in the slot.
I'm sorry?
Eccles hadn't played a lot in the slot before you got him. Was that something you kind of always thought he would be able to do, or maybe you learned about him through the process?
He played some in New York in the slot. As a matter of fact, I think he played over 100 snaps or so inside for the Jets.
DK's had 3 really big home run after catch plays, 2 against New York and then the one in Ireland. And they're all 3 pretty astute moments of recognition from Aaron. He motioned somebody away, lots of space in the deep end, and he took it 81 yards for a touchdown. How much can Aaron highlight that for DK kind of in the moment at the line of scrimmage when he sees something available for him?
Well, you're reaching there. Aaron's an experienced quarterback, man. He makes good and timely decisions.
I was like, where's the
ball to
question?
big people with top end speed, that's what happens. When you do it on time. And his ability to operate on time creates run after opportunities, not only for DK, but for everyone. And certainly DK has a skill set that's capable of producing the plays that you mentioned.
Anyone else?
What do you love most about the environment of a home AFC North game?
I just love being in big-time competition. I'm a competition junkie. And I just think the divisional component of how our schedules are aligned these days in today's game, the intimacy specifically of the AFC North, the stability within the programs, man. Kevin's been in Cleveland for a number of years. I've known Jim Schwartz for a long time. I think that intimacy, that knowledge creates competition. I think the geographic proximity creates a cool environment. There's a lot to be excited about relative to this game this weekend and AFC North football.
When you had to face a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who's so good at the line of scrimmage in the past, what are you seeing now that he's your quarterback? How are defenses, how do they react to this guy because they know what he's like at the line of scrimmage?
Sometimes the things that you do have nothing to do with who you're competing against. Your ability to disguise and time blitzes and things of that nature oftentimes depends on the collective experience of your group. And so I think generally that's where defensive architects start. And certainly Jim Schwartz has the players and the experience within his group to play that cat and mouse game with Aaron, with guys like Denzel Ward and Delpit back there and Newsome that have been back there for a long time. They have the collective experience to hold disguises, to get in and out of calls, and to do the things to match wits with a guy like Aaron. But I think first and foremost, it starts with yourselves. And that's why I mentioned the experience, the collective experience that they have.
Like with these division games coming up, obviously all three other teams lost this weekend. How do you feel about where you guys sit in the division right now?
I don't care what happened with other people, particularly last weekend. It's about us coming off the bye and getting ready for our game this week. I'm not a big picture guy.
Anyone else? All right.
Thanks.
All right,
Oh. So let's see. Okay. Just 1 second here. I'm just getting this information. And I believe this is right. So, okay. I hope this is updated the most. So that'll be the last thing I cover. So I got quite a few notes here. So Joey, Alex, and Jalen Warren, I just put a little smiley face because chances are we see all three of those guys this week. Joey seems to be fully healthy. Jalen was a precautionary held out. Alex, even if he plays 50% of the snaps, him and Nick split, right? So even if they play 50% of the snaps each, it's likely we see all three. Ramsey and Calvin Austin are a different story. I did see something after the Steelers game in Dublin that Jalen and Calvin could miss time, and I commented on it and said, I get Calvin, right? He had to go to the hospital. He tweeted out he was all good, but he didn't finish the game. So him, I could understand missing games. But I thought that Jalen, with the bye week and the fact that he was able to participate after getting injured, Tomlin said he was in and out, I thought maybe he would still have a chance of playing, and we'll see if that holds true. If not, and he misses... I feel like if he misses this game, could he play Thursday versus Cincy? That would probably be really when you want him, just because of how each team plays and deploys their personnel. Cleveland throws more to the tight ends than to receivers, but Cincinnati has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so they want to give it to the receivers. So it's possible that it's, hey, let's sit Ramsey week 6, and then he could, in theory, play week 7. If he doesn't play week 7, then he would definitely be ready for week 8, I would say. Just because at that point we get a week and a half, just a little mini bye. Which, I gotta say, to get a bye, play a game, and then play Thursday, it's like, yeah, you played a game and you have to play Thursday. But at least you're coming off your bye, So that, and then you're going to get a mini bye. So week 8, you're probably you're not too bad as far as rest. Tomlin said that they have been focusing on conditioning coming off their bye, which it makes sense. You didn't play a game. So it's, hey, you guys rested. Let's get conditioning going again. Dylan Gabriel is starting, 6 years in college. So I mean, yeah, he only has one NFL start under his belt, but he's got plenty of starting experience in college. We got Judkins is balling, and he didn't even have like a warm up or a ramp up really to the season, like training camp, anything like that, preseason, because he didn't have a contract with the Browns because of his. He was facing the was it domestic violence? It was some kind of charge he was facing. Charge was dropped, and then it's like, okay, now how are we going to solve this whole contract thing? And he's been doing great since. Cleveland does have some chemistry on their own line with the three guys that Tomlin mentioned. They have about 50 starts together. The two guys have about 90 starts each, and Joe Bitonio having 166, did he say? Oh, yes. I wanted to look up Mike Tomlin's record coming off the bye week. Bye. They have, okay, so since 2017, the Steelers have won 8 straight games coming off of their bye. That is very interesting. Since he became the coach in 2007, they are 14-4 coming off of their bye. So they were 6-4. That is interesting. The last time they lost coming off their bye was in 2016 in Baltimore. That was also the same season Pittsburgh last won a postseason game en route to an AFC Championship appearance. Interesting. So, 14-4. And they've won their last 8 bye weeks. Games coming off a bye. That is very interesting. Cleveland's use of tight ends, Fannin and Njoku. I mentioned just a minute ago that they really like to use the tight ends. Excuse me. And they are both very athletic. They are Jonnu-like, he mentioned. Cleveland has a great defense. Yes, they have Myles Garrett, but they have other guys too. They have guys on the D-line. Mason Graham was brought up. He was the 5th pick in the draft after Cleveland traded from 2 with Jacksonville. They have Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome. They have Grant Delpit, Carson Swessinger, the rookie linebacker from UCLA. He was picked at the top of the 2nd round. So they have plenty of talent on this defense outside of Myles Garrett. And I do think you can come up with a valid, sound argument that not only is it a great defense, but that they are potentially the best defense in the NFL. Personnel is being determined by the matchups, which I do appreciate. They aren't just saying, this is what we do well, this is what we know, and we're going to do it, even if it shoots us, even if we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Like, play to what can work. So, I brought up the fact that Pat Freiermuth had a very, very low number of snaps in the game in Dublin, and Darnell Washington had a very, very high number of snaps. And that is matchup based. So now you're going to have another matchup where it's going to be a heavy Darnell game. And I listened to The Drive. It's on Steelers Nation Radio. It's Wes Euler, and Matt Williamson. And they officially called it the corned beef package. It is the Spencer Anderson, Darnell Washington. We are basically running 7 offensive linemen because that's how big Darnell is. And we're going. So Roman or Scotty could see an increased role here. And a comparison I want to make, because Roman's been catching a lot of flack, right? I want to look at Calvin Austin's second year in the league, because as a rookie, he was injured. He had a foot injury, and he missed the entirety of the season, okay? So I want to look at his second year in the league. He had 17 catches for 180 yards and 1 touchdown off 30 targets. That was year 2 for Calvin Austin. Okay. So, bro caught an average of 1 pass per game. 1. And look how he has developed since to be the team's number 2, and he's made some plays. So far this year, he has 10 catches, 139 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Last year, he had 36 catches for 548 and 4 touchdowns. So, assuming he doesn't miss too much time here, he's going to improve on his year 2 numbers. That's, like I said, that's assuming he doesn't miss too much time. So, don't be too hard on Roman, because, like, if he has a bad year 2 or an underwhelming year 2 from what we would have expected, don't take that as he can't play, he's a bum, he was a bust of a draft pick. Like, let's see how it goes. And he brought up the fact that, hey, like, it may not be what he's doing or what he's not doing or what the other receivers are or aren't doing. It could just be the fact that they're playing certain personnel packages, and he's not going to be able to be used. You can't play 15 guys on offense. You can't. You got to play 11. And by the time you play 5 offensive linemen and your quarterback, you've only got 5 spots. And, you're not taking DK off the field to put Roman on. So now you're down to 4 spots. Like, are you going to take away a tight end to put Roman on? What are we doing? Like, don't be too quick to say he's a bust or that he can or can't play based on, what little we've seen. Like, he was hurt last year, just like Calvin Austin was hurt year 1. Like, this isn't, oh, we saw you for 1 game and we know what you are for your career. So, just calm down. Okay, Miles versus Broderick, and he brought up, like, I don't need to tell Broderick, like, hey, you're going against Miles, he's really good. Like, no, Broderick knows Miles is really good. And here's something I'm going to bring up. Excuse me, I'm going to need a drink soon. Let's say, hypothetical, Broderick is shutting down Miles. I gotta get a drink. Alright, I'm a little better now. So yes, Miles versus Broderick. So, you know, he's not dumb. He knows how good Miles is. Everyone knows how good Miles is. Now, there's always the debate on who's better, TJ or Miles. Like, here's one thing that I can say about TJ and Miles that no Steelers fan or Browns fan can dispute. It is that both guys will end up being in the Hall of Fame one day. Both of them. We are talking about two future Hall of Famers. That is indisputable. So, no matter who you think is better, both guys are going to be wearing gold jackets one day. It's the same thing when Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu were making plays in the AFC North. Both guys would end up with gold jackets one day. It's the same thing. So I was talking about in a hypothetical scenario where Broderick is shutting down Miles, right? And everyone's like, this was the matchup, and Broderick's doing great. Miles moves. Like, he's a little bit like how J.J. Watt was. And Chris Jones does this. Like, guys will find one matchup where it's eeny, meeny, miny, you, right? They find the weak link in that offensive line. Whoever it is, the left tackle, the left guard, the center, the right guard, or the right tackle. They find the weakest link, and they exploit it. So if Miles is having zero luck versus Broderick, maybe he says, all right, I'm going to kick it over a spot. Hello, Isaac. And let's say Isaac holds down the fort. All right, I'm moving over again. Hello, Zach. Zach holds down the fort. All right, I'm going to move it over again. And Mason, right? Maybe Mason struggles. He's like, I found my matchup. Or maybe Mason does great. All right, Troy, I'm going against you now. Second year, your first year as a starter. Let's see what you got. And maybe he gets beat a ton. And it's, all right, I found my matchup. And all of a sudden, it's not Broderick versus Miles. It's Troy versus Miles. And Troy's losing that fight. Like, you never know. Or Mason's losing that fight. Zach is. Isaac is. Or hell, maybe Broderick's losing that fight. Miles is going to move across the line until he finds a matchup that he likes, that he can exploit, that he feels like he's going to win on a pretty consistent basis. So, yes, that's the big matchup that people have in their heads, but that may not be the matchup that we see consistently on Sunday. And one last note that I have. This game could absolutely be a low-scoring affair. Cleveland's defense really, really, really good. Like, I think since Jim Schwartz has taken over the defense, did I hear they were number 1 in the league? They were one of the top defenses, maybe the top defense in the league since he took over. In like 23, 24, and so far in 25. They were one of the best, if not the best. But in that span, they have also been one of the worst, if not the worst, offense So it could be a very low scoring game. And then it could be a very close game. So I felt like putting in Tomlin's record in one-score games. I brought it up recently, I think maybe even yesterday in whatever video I was talking about. But, let's see. I had to go to Reddit, and it looks like at the end of 2024, his record in one-score games was 98, 61, and 2. But this year, weeks 1, 3, and 4 have all been one-score games, bringing his record to 101, 61, and 2. It says here, since 1970, only 4 head coaches who have coached at least 100 games have more than Tomlin's 98 wins in one-score games. Those coaches, Bill Belichick with 120, Andy Reid with 110, Don Shula 106, and 105 from Dan Reeves, all have coached far longer than Tomlin. Let's see what this article is here. Let's see. 5 for Friday. Tomlin shows his value in close games. This was from July 5th, 2024. So this was even last year. So how many? So he might even have more. It says, I don't know, it says 2025 season. All of those were one-score games. But what were his records in the one-score games last year? I said, like, he could lose, like, his next 40 one-score games to get to 500. Like, it's ridiculous. His one-score game record. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous. Let's see. Like, I just gotta type in. It's literally like 40 games more. Record in one-score games. Because AI says 98, 61, and 2. But I think that's old. But even then, even if it's 98, 61, and 2, let's say. I mean, 3 days ago it says Coach Tomlin now has 101 wins in one-score games. That was 3 days ago on Reddit. So that is quite possibly his record, is 101, 61, and 2. So, like, he is a great coach when it comes to one-score games. And obviously, you don't want it to come down to one score. You don't. But it's gonna. The NFL is designed for it. Between the modern-day free agency started in the 90s. The salary cap, I did Google it, started in the 90s. Or basically at the same time as modern-day free agency. So, free agency, salary cap. Now, the worst teams were getting the best draft picks for decades. Expansion teams would get the first pick in order to help teams that were worse get better. Like the first NFL draft was in 1936. Because everyone was signing with the good teams. So all the good players go to the good teams. The bad teams don't get better. So even if it is a close game, if it ends up being 17-13, throwing a score out there. You know, it's 17-13 Steelers. Win. Like, don't be like, we only beat the Browns by 4. That defense is amazing. Like, I don't think I can stress that enough, how good that defense is. Green Bay scored 10. Granted, they probably should have scored 13 if a field goal isn't blocked. But then it's congratulations. You scored 13. Now, yes, Baltimore with Lamar, you scored 41. Let's see. So if I go to Browns real quick, this is going to be the last thing we do for this video. This year, they have allowed 17, 41, 13, 34, 21. The 41 was to the Ravens with Lamar, and the 34 was to the Lions. So they're not giving up, 30, 40 points to a terrible offense. They're, for the most part, they're holding it down a little. Though, actually, here's the funny thing, and I'm noticing something here as I look. Browns at home versus the Bengals, it was 17. Browns in Baltimore, it was 41. Browns at home versus the Packers, that's when they allowed 10. Browns go to Detroit, they allow 34. Now, it was a neutral field in London, but the Browns were technically the home team, and they allowed the 21. But they were at 14 until 25 seconds left in the game when Minnesota scored. So it looks a little bit like when you're at home, the defense is really, really good. Crowd noise. When you're away and the offense doesn't have to go silent count, you're struggling a little. So that could be a factor too. Is Cleveland going to struggle a little because they're in Pittsburgh, they're not in Cleveland? You never know. That is something I literally just noticed. But we'll have to see. That is it for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.